Have you ever felt that someone in your own family says they love you, but their actions constantly leave you confused, drained, or hurt? Have you noticed that after certain conversations, you feel smaller, guilty, or emotionally exhausted instead of supported? This is not weakness, and it's not your imagination. There is a deeper reason behind these patterns, and understanding it can completely change how you see your pain. Today, you're going to discover why God allows, and sometimes causes, distance between you and family members who pretend to love you, and how this separation is often a form of protection, not punishment. Maybe you're facing silent tension, unexpected conflicts, or emotional separation inside your own family, and you don't understand why this is happening now. But what if this removal is not loss, but divine alignment? What if God is creating distance to preserve your peace, your identity, and your purpose? In this video, you'll learn how to recognize these signs, why God works this way, and what changes when you stop fighting the process and start understanding it. Stay until the end, because this insight may finally free you from an emotional cycle that has held you back for years, and prepare you for the next level of your life. Before we continue, stay fully focused, because this message may explain family situations you've never been able to understand. If this already speaks to you, like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss messages that bring clarity, strength, and spiritual direction. Watch until the end, because each point connects to the next, and missing one could mean missing the breakthrough you need. What you're about to hear may reveal exactly why God is allowing distance in your family right now. There is a painful truth most people avoid acknowledging. Not everyone who calls you family is meant to walk with you forever, and that realization alone already creates emotional tension. From the very beginning of your life, God establishes seasons, and every season has a specific purpose, a clear assignment, and a defined ending. When family members pretend to love you but consistently undermine your growth, your peace, or your sense of identity, a silent spiritual conflict begins to form. You may feel confused, guilty for even considering distance, or pressured to stay connected simply because of shared blood. But God never prioritizes blood over purpose. He prioritizes protection. God does not remove people randomly, emotionally, or impulsively. He removes strategically, precisely, and intentionally. The discomfort you feel is not betrayal, it is exposure. And the more you grow, the more fake love becomes unbearable, impossible to ignore, and emotionally expensive. Pay attention, because the tension you feel right now is evidence that God is already intervening in ways you cannot fully see yet. One of the clearest reasons God removes family members is because fake love always demands access without accountability, and that dynamic slowly destroys your emotional stability. These people want full access to your life, your time, your energy, your victories, and even your resources, but they avoid responsibility for how they speak to you, treat you, or affect your mental health. They disguise control as concern, criticism as advice, and manipulation as protection. For example, they may constantly question your decisions for your own good, while never supporting your progress. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion, confusion, and spiritual stagnation. God sees what you tolerate silently. He sees the conversations that drain you, the moments you shrink yourself to keep peace, and the guilt you carry that was never yours to hold. This is where separation begins, not with hatred or loud conflict, but with clarity that slowly becomes impossible to ignore. Another powerful reason God removes certain family members is because they are assigned to an older version of you, not the person you are becoming. They only know how to relate to who you were when you were smaller, more dependent, more agreeable, and easier to influence. When God starts elevating you mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, their behavior subtly shifts. They may mock your discipline, minimize your faith, or question your new boundaries. A practical example is when you stop oversharing your plans and they accuse you of being distant or changed. That resistance is not accidental. Not everyone can handle your evolution, especially those who benefited from your limitations. God will not allow your future to be negotiated by people who are uncomfortable with your growth. This is why distance often happens right when you become more focused, intentional, and self-aware. The separation feels sudden, but it was prepared long before you recognized it. God also removes fake family love because prolonged exposure slowly distorts your identity and self-trust. When you remain too long around people who constantly misunderstand you, invalidate your feelings, or question your intentions, you begin questioning yourself. You start over-explaining simple decisions, apologizing for boundaries, and delaying action while waiting for approval that will never come. For instance, you may hesitate to pursue an opportunity because you already anticipate their criticism. This is dangerous. God is not trying to isolate you. He is trying to recalibrate you. Distance restores perspective. Silence rebuilds discernment. Separation strengthens your ability to hear God clearly without emotional interference. This is why peace often returns only after the connection fades. If you felt lighter, clearer, or more confident since the distance began, that is confirmation, not coincidence. There is a deeper spiritual layer many people overlook. Some family members were assigned to your survival season, not your elevation season. They were present when you needed protection, shelter, or basic support, but they are not equipped to walk with you into purpose, visibility, or leadership. When survival ends, resistance begins. God knows who may sabotage you unintentionally through jealousy, fear, or unresolved wounds. Instead of allowing open conflict, He creates quiet distance. You don't need dramatic confrontations or emotional explanations. God handles removals without chaos when you stop interfering. The urge to force understanding is often your last emotional attachment to a season God already closed. And holding on only delays what He is preparing next. As this separation unfolds, many people mistakenly interpret God's protection as loneliness, when in reality it is a season of deep internal reconstruction that most never talk about. Loneliness only feels unbearable when you were taught that your worth comes from being constantly surrounded, validated, or emotionally needed. God intentionally allows silence to expose that belief. In this space, He begins rebuilding your confidence from the inside out, without external noise, opinions, or emotional interference. You may notice you are no longer anxious before family gatherings, no longer rehearsing explanations in your head, no longer bracing yourself for criticism. A practical example is realizing you can make a decision without immediately imagining how certain family members will react. That silence is not emptiness, it is clarity forming. God removes voices so you can finally recognize your own. What feels like isolation is preparation, and preparation always precedes elevation, even when it feels uncomfortable at first. Another reason God creates distance is because some family members only know how to connect through dysfunction, not health. Their version of bonding requires drama, crisis, emotional chaos, or shared negativity. When life becomes calm, the relationship feels empty to them. They unconsciously recreate tension to feel connected again. When you begin healing, regulating your emotions, and choosing peace, they feel uncomfortable or even threatened. A clear example is when you stop reacting emotionally and they accuse you of being cold, distant, or changed. In reality, you just stopped feeding dysfunction. God removes people who require you to stay broken in order to feel close to them. Healing disrupts unhealthy familiarity. Distance becomes the only environment where growth can survive without being sabotaged by old emotional patterns. God also separates you from fake love because it competes directly with your obedience. Some family members may not openly oppose God, but they subtly weaken your obedience through doubt, fear, and guilt. They question your decisions, your boundaries, or your faith, not because they have wisdom, but because your obedience exposes their compromise. A practical example is feeling excited about a new direction, goal, or discipline, only to feel drained or discouraged after sharing it with them. God sees how repeated exposure slowly erodes your courage. Separation protects your obedience. When the voices grow quieter, your conviction grows stronger. God will always remove influences that confuse your obedience, because clarity is essential for purpose. There are moments when God removes people simply because they no longer recognize you. Growth creates unfamiliarity, and unfamiliarity creates discomfort for those attached to old versions of you. They say, "You're not the same anymore," as if that is an accusation. In truth, it is confirmation. You were never meant to stay the same. A practical sign is when conversations become shallow, tense, or forced. You realize you cannot speak freely without being misunderstood, judged, or minimized. God allows emotional distance so you stop shrinking yourself to maintain comfort. Familiarity can feel safe, but it should never be stronger than purpose or personal integrity. God also removes family members who constantly remind you of who you used to be instead of honoring who you are becoming. They bring up past mistakes, old labels, and outdated narratives even after you've grown. This keeps you mentally anchored to a version of yourself God already redeemed. For example, they joke about your past failures while ignoring your discipline, growth, and maturity. God knows identity cannot flourish in environments that refuse to update their perception of you. Distance protects your self-image. It allows your new identity to stabilize without being challenged by people committed to your past. Another painful but necessary reason for separation is emotional dependency. Some family relationships are built on you being the emotional anchor, the listener, the fixer, the one who absorbs everyone else's stress. Over time, this role becomes exhausting and invisible. God removes you from these dynamics because your purpose requires emotional strength, not depletion. A clear example is when you stop answering every call and instead of guilt, you feel relief. That relief is not selfishness, it is restoration. God never designed you to carry emotional burdens that interfere with your calling. God also creates distance when conversations consistently leave you confused rather than clarified. Fake love thrives in ambiguity. They offer compliments with hidden judgment, advice that creates doubt, and concern that feels heavy. Over time, this mental fog weakens your discernment. God values clarity. When confusing voices are removed, your mind settles. Decisions become simpler. You stop second-guessing yourself. Peace returns. This is not coincidence, it is correction. Another overlooked sign is when God restricts access to your vulnerability. You no longer feel safe sharing your fears, plans, or struggles with certain family members because your openness is later used against you. God protects you by closing emotional doors before deeper damage occurs. A practical example is when you instinctively keep conversations brief or surface level. That instinct is wisdom forming. God often protects long before He explains. God also removes people who consistently test your boundaries. Boundaries expose entitlement. When you say no and they respond with guilt, anger, or manipulation, that relationship becomes unsafe. God reinforces distance so your boundaries can strengthen without resistance. Over time, peace becomes normal instead of rare. That is alignment. There are seasons when God removes family members to break generational patterns. You may be the first to choose emotional health, accountability, or spiritual growth. That choice disrupts old cycles. Resistance follows. God creates distance so the pattern stops with you. Separation protects the new standard you are establishing. Another reason God removes people is because your future requires space. You cannot receive new relationships while clinging to old ones that drain you. God subtracts to prepare you for multiplication. When some people leave, healthier connections appear. This is alignment. Finally, God allows this distance to teach you self-trust. When validation disappears, conviction grows. You learn to rely on God instead of approval. The pain fades, but the clarity remains, and once you experience peace without explanation, you never chase confusion again. As God continues this work of separation, one of the hardest and most humbling lessons you learn is that distance reveals truth faster, cleaner, and more honestly than confrontation ever could. Conversations can be manipulated, explanations can be twisted, and emotions can cloud judgment, but absence cannot lie. When certain family members step back, their absence begins to speak louder than every promise, every affectionate word, and every claim of love they ever made. You start noticing patterns you once ignored. You see who checks on you without needing anything in return, who respects your silence instead of demanding access, and who completely disappears the moment you stop over-giving, over-explaining, and over-sacrificing. This realization hurts deeply, because it forces you to accept that some connections were sustained only by what you provided, not by who you are. A practical example is recognizing that certain people only reached out when they needed emotional support, financial help, favors, or validation. But once you stopped supplying those things, they vanished without concern. God uses distance as a mirror, not to shame you, but to show you reality without emotional fog, guilt, or obligation. At first, this awareness feels like loss, but over time it becomes empowering, because you finally stop investing energy where there is no reciprocity, no care, and no growth. That clarity becomes the foundation for healthier, more honest relationships moving forward. Another powerful internal shift happens when you finally realize that peace itself is confirmation. For a long time, you may have unknowingly equated love with intensity. Constant communication, emotional highs and lows, dramatic conversations, and the feeling that something always needed to be fixed or discussed. God slowly retrains your nervous system and your spirit to recognize peace as alignment, not boredom. A clear example is when days pass without conflict, anxiety, emotional exhaustion, or mental tension, and instead of feeling empty, you feel grounded and stable. That stability may feel unfamiliar at first, because chaos was once normal. Fake love thrives on turbulence, urgency, and emotional reactions. Real love survives and grows in calm, safety, and consistency. God removes people who disturb your peace because peace is not a luxury. It is a requirement for discernment, growth, clarity, and purpose. Without peace, you cannot hear God clearly or make wise decisions. Once you experience peace consistently, something changes inside you. You become unwilling to return to relationships that cost you your mental health, self-respect, or emotional balance, no matter how familiar or long-standing they are. Peace raises your standard permanently. God also uses this season of separation to expose how much emotional labor you were performing without ever realizing it. You were managing other people's moods, anticipating reactions before speaking, choosing words carefully to avoid triggering conflict, and suppressing your own truth just to keep the atmosphere calm. Over time, this constant self-monitoring becomes exhausting, even if you couldn't fully explain why you always felt drained. Once distance exists, that emotional labor suddenly disappears, and the relief is undeniable. A practical example is noticing that you no longer feel tired, tense, or heavy after conversations, because those conversations are no longer happening. You stop replaying interactions in your head. You stop bracing yourself emotionally. This is not emptiness, it is relief and restoration. God removes people who require performance instead of authenticity, because your life was never meant to be a constant emotional negotiation. You were not created to manage dysfunction. You were created to live in truth, peace, and alignment. Another layer many people deeply struggle with during this process is guilt, especially guilt rooted in family dynamics. Family-based guilt is powerful because it rarely presents itself as control. Instead, it disguises itself as responsibility, loyalty, or obligation. You are subtly taught that if someone in your family is uncomfortable, disappointed, or upset, it must somehow be your fault or your duty to fix it. God confronts this distortion by allowing you to clearly see that their emotions are not your assignment. When you stop rescuing, fixing, over-explaining, or constantly making yourself available, their reaction exposes the truth. They may accuse you of changing, becoming distant, or abandoning them, even though what you actually did was choose health. This moment is painful because it challenges long-held beliefs about love and duty. But guilt begins to lose its power the moment clarity grows. A practical breakthrough happens when you finally realize that their disappointment does not equal your disobedience. Just because someone is unhappy with your boundary does not mean you are wrong. God never called you to carry emotional responsibility that interferes with obedience to His direction. When guilt fades, freedom replaces it, and obedience becomes lighter, not heavier. God also uses this season to strengthen your boundaries internally, not just externally, and this distinction is crucial. External boundaries are about what you say and do, but internal boundaries are about what you allow yourself to feel obligated to explain. This season teaches you that it's not only about saying no to others, it's about saying yes to yourself without justification, apology, or defense. You stop over-explaining your rest, your silence, your distance, or your decisions. A clear example is choosing not to attend an event, respond to a message, or engage in a conversation simply because it does not align with your peace, and then noticing that you feel calm afterward instead of anxious. That calm is not indifference, it is maturity. God removes people who constantly test your boundaries so you can finally experience life without living in a defensive posture. You no longer feel the need to prepare explanations in advance. You no longer negotiate your needs internally. This internal boundary creates emotional stability and allows you to live from conviction instead of pressure, which is essential for long-term growth and clarity. As this process continues, you begin noticing something subtle but powerful. Your discernment sharpens. You become more aware of emotional shifts, unspoken tension, and underlying motives. You sense energy changes quickly. You recognize manipulation sooner, even when it's wrapped in humor, concern, or tradition. You no longer ignore red flags just to keep relationships intact or avoid discomfort. God allows this because discernment is not judgment, it is protection. A practical example is immediately feeling uneasy in conversations that once felt normal, casual, or harmless. Instead of dismissing that feeling or talking yourself out of it, you pause. You observe. You honor it. God trains you to trust what you sense internally, not just what you are told verbally. This discernment becomes a safeguard, helping you navigate relationships with wisdom instead of emotional urgency. Over time, you realize this clarity is not making you colder, it is making you safer, stronger, and more aligned. God also reveals, often in a very quiet but undeniable way, that some relationships were sustained only by proximity, not by true connection. While you were physically close, emotionally available, or constantly present, the relationship appeared strong. But once distance exists, whether emotional, physical, or spiritual, there is suddenly nothing holding it together. This realization can be sobering, even painful, because it forces you to confront the truth that familiarity was doing the work that connection never did. Yet this awareness carries an important lesson. Forced closeness is not love. Obligation is not intimacy. Love chooses. Love respects space. Love does not collapse the moment access is limited. God removes relationships built on routine, convenience, or obligation so you can experience relationships built on mutual respect, voluntary presence, and emotional safety. A practical example is noticing that when you stop initiating contact, the relationship completely disappears. That absence reveals that effort was never mutual. God allows this so you stop confusing endurance with love and presence with commitment. This clarity reshapes how you define connection moving forward. Another breakthrough occurs when you finally realize that your growth is no longer negotiable. For years, you may have slowed down your healing, muted your voice, softened your truth, or delayed decisions to preserve family harmony. You learned to compromise yourself to avoid discomfort. God ends that negotiation decisively. A practical sign is when you stop asking permission to evolve. You pursue healing, discipline, faith, or purpose even if others don't understand or approve. This is not rebellion. It is alignment. God never intended your destiny to be delayed by someone else's comfort level. When growth becomes non-negotiable, guilt loses leverage. You stop measuring your progress by who is comfortable with it. You begin honoring the pace God set for you, not the pace others prefer. This shift is powerful because it marks the moment you choose obedience over approval and alignment over acceptance. God also uses separation as preparation for visibility, even if you don't yet recognize it as such. As you grow, your life may become more impactful, influential, or noticeable in ways you never anticipated. Your voice becomes clearer. Your presence becomes stronger. Your direction becomes undeniable. Fake love cannot survive in environments of clarity and growth. God removes people who would later become sources of sabotage, gossip, jealousy, or quiet resentment. Protection now prevents pain later. This is not rejection, it is foresight. A practical example is realizing that certain people already reacted negatively to your small growth. God knows how they would respond to your elevation. By removing them early, He protects your peace, your reputation, and your focus. Visibility requires emotional safety, and God ensures you are surrounded only by those who can handle where you are going. Eventually, you reach a profound turning point where you stop waiting for reconciliation in order to feel whole. You accept that some relationships will remain distant, unresolved, or permanently changed, and instead of resisting that reality, you find peace in it. This acceptance is freedom. A practical example is wishing them well without needing them close, without rehearsing conversations in your head, and without hoping they will one day understand. God teaches you that closure is not something others give you. It is something you claim through understanding and acceptance. When you release the need for reconciliation as proof of worth, you step into emotional independence. You stop reopening wounds for the sake of familiarity. You move forward lighter, clearer, and grounded in the truth that wholeness does not depend on everyone staying. As this season matures, something subtle yet profound begins to happen. Gratitude slowly replaces grief. In the beginning, the separation felt heavy, confusing, and unfair. You mourned what you thought was lost, questioned what went wrong, and replayed moments searching for answers. But over time, clarity softens the pain. You begin thanking God not only for who stayed and proved their love through consistency and respect, but also for who left and revealed the truth through absence. You notice how much quieter your mind has become without constant emotional noise. You recognize how much stronger your faith is now that it is no longer filtered through other people's opinions, doubts, or expectations. Your heart feels lighter because it is no longer carrying relationships that demanded sacrifice without care. Separation becomes evidence of divine care, not rejection. You realize God was protecting your peace, preserving your identity, and creating space for alignment. What once felt like loss now feels like rescue. Gratitude grows because you finally understand that what God removed was blocking what He was preparing to give you. And here is the final truth that ties everything together and brings clarity to every painful moment you've endured. God removes family members who fake love because fake love cannot follow you into purpose. Purpose requires truth. Purpose demands boundaries. Purpose thrives in growth and peace. Wherever these exist, false connections collapse under their own weight. What felt like loss was alignment. What felt like abandonment was protection. And what felt like pain was preparation. God was not tearing your life apart. He was rearranging it. He was removing what looked familiar but was limiting you. He was separating you from emotional patterns that could not survive at the level He is taking you. Fake love cannot celebrate your elevation, respect your boundaries, or support your obedience. God removes it now so it doesn't sabotage you later. This is not cruelty, it is precision. If you are in this season right now, hear this clearly. You are not behind, you are not broken, and you are not failing. You are being refined. Refinement is uncomfortable because it removes what no longer belongs. God is not removing love from your life. He is removing what pretended to be love so the real thing can finally reach you. Real love honors your growth. Real love respects your boundaries. Real love does not drain you, it strengthens you. When you understand this, peace settles in your spirit. You stop questioning God's timing and start trusting His wisdom. What is leaving is making room. What remains will sustain you. Now that you've reached this point, it's important to slow down and fully grasp what this moment represents. If this message resonated deeply with you, it's because you are already living this separation in real time, even if you didn't have the words for it before. Nothing you heard today was accidental, random, or simply motivational. You didn't stumble onto this video by chance. God has been preparing you internally long before your mind caught up with what your spirit already sensed. The confusion you experienced, the emotional distance that seemed to appear without explanation, the sudden clarity that followed moments of silence, and even the quiet grief you tried to suppress were all part of a deliberate refining process. This is the point where you stop questioning whether God is involved and start recognizing how intentional every detail has been. What felt slow was not delay, it was protection. What felt lonely was not abandonment, it was alignment. And what felt painful was not punishment, it was necessary preparation. You are not losing anything essential. You are shedding what could not follow you into the next level God is preparing. Here is what matters most moving forward, and this is where many people make a critical mistake. Do not go back to what God has already revealed, even when nostalgia, guilt, or pressure tries to pull you backward. Familiarity can be deceptive, especially when it is tied to emotional history. Reopening doors God closed will only reintroduce confusion, not clarity. Growth requires consistency, not constant explanation or approval. The clarity you have now is powerful, but it is also fragile if you ignore it. Guard it deliberately. Protect your peace without apology. Honor the boundaries God helped you build, even when others question them. You don't need closure conversations to move forward. You don't need validation to obey. And you don't need everyone to understand your journey for it to be real. Obedience often costs comfort, approval, and familiarity, but it never costs peace. Peace is your confirmation. The moment you stop chasing familiar pain, you create space for unfamiliar blessing, deeper alignment, and lasting freedom. If this message spoke directly to your life, don't rush past it. Sit with it. Let it confirm what God has already been whispering to you. And if you want to continue receiving messages like this, messages that bring clarity, strength, and spiritual discernment, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are more insights ahead that will help you navigate growth without guilt and purpose without fear. Share this with someone who is silently struggling with family dynamics they can't explain. Sometimes, one message is all it takes to bring peace where confusion once lived.